She threw me out on the street the day after my son's funeral, claiming the house was hers. Now at the will reading, she laughed. "Hope you enjoy being homeless, Charlie." Then the lawyer opened the sealed envelope. "My name is Charlie Newman. I'm 58 years old, and let me tell you how this whole mess started. Because sometimes the best revenge is just letting people reveal exactly who they really are." The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Ben's voice on the other end was strained, breathless. "Dad, something's wrong, my chest. I can't," the line went dead. By the time I reached the hospital, my 42-year-old son was gone. Massive heart attack, the doctor explained with clinical detachment. Nothing they could do. Amanda Newman stood beside me in that sterile waiting room, her face a mask of shock, but I caught something else in her expression. Relief? No, surely I was imagining things in my grief. "What happens now?" I whispered, still unable to process that Ben, my healthy, vibrant son, was simply gone. Amanda straightened her shoulders, and for a moment her composure slipped. "Now we deal with reality, Charlie. Ben's gone, and I have decisions to make." The coldness in her voice sent a chill through me. We'd never been particularly close, Amanda and I, but Ben had always been the bridge between us. Now that bridge was gone, and I was beginning to understand just how deep the chasm really was. "Of course, dear. We'll get through this together," I said. Reaching for her hand, she pulled away. "We'll see about that." I should have recognized the warning in those words. Instead, I attributed her coldness to shock. People grieve differently. I told myself some become emotional, others turn inward. Amanda was clearly the latter. The funeral arrangements consumed the next 3 days. I offered to help pay for everything. Ben had been my only child, after all, but Amanda insisted on handling it herself. "I'm his wife," she kept saying. I know what he would have wanted. Fair enough. I focused on writing his eulogy, calling relatives, and trying to hold myself together. At 58, I'd buried my parents and my wife Sarah, but losing a child felt like a special kind of hell. The night before the funeral, as I sat in what had been Ben's childhood bedroom in the house he'd shared with Amanda, I found myself staring at the framed photos on the dresser. Ben graduating college, Ben and Amanda's wedding, Ben holding his nephew at Christmas last year. What I didn't see were any photos of Ben and me from recent years. Amanda had systematically removed them, I realized. When had that happened? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Amanda stood in the doorway, no longer bothering to hide the calculating look in her eyes. "We need to talk, Charlie. The funeral was beautiful. I'll give Amanda that. The flower arrangements were elegant, the music was Ben's favorite hymns, and the reception afterward was perfectly orchestrated. What wasn't beautiful was watching my daughter-in-law play the grieving widow while making pointed comments about moving forward in new chapters. I stood in the receiving line accepting condolences from friends and family when I overheard Amanda talking to her brother behind the flower arrangements. "The life insurance alone will cover the mortgage for 2 years, she was saying in a low voice, "and without the extra expenses." "Extra expenses? What extra expenses?" "What about Charlie?" Kyle asked. "Where will he go?" Amanda's laugh was sharp and brittle. "That's not my problem anymore. He can figure it out like the rest of us adults." My blood ran cold. I'd been living with them for 2 years, ever since I'd sold my house to help with their down payment. Ben had insisted it would be temporary just until I found something smaller and more manageable. Somehow temporary had stretched into permanent, and I'd grown comfortable in the routine of helping with the house, cooking dinner, being useful. Apparently I'd been naive. "Charlie," Amanda appeared at my elbow, her public face firmly in place. "Could you help me in the kitchen? There are some things we need to discuss." I followed her through the crowd of mourners, nodding at neighbors and accepting final hugs from my brother who was flying back to Phoenix in the morning. In the kitchen, Amanda closed the door and turned to face me. "I'm going to be direct," she said, her voice calm and businesslike. "This house is in Ben's name, which means it's mine now. I need time and space to process my grief without complications." "Complications?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "You living here, it's not working anymore, Charlie. I need my privacy." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Amanda, I understand you're grieving, but surely we can." "No." She held up a hand. "I've made my decision. I'll give you until tomorrow evening to pack your things." That should be plenty of time. I stared at her, searching for any sign of the woman who'd once called me dad, who'd hugged me at Christmas dinners, who'd cried when Ben proposed. That woman was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" Amanda shrugged. "You're a grown man, Charlie. You'll figure something out." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Ben would be horrified by this conversation. Ben's dead. The words came out flat, final. And the sooner you accept that, the better off we'll both be. I packed my entire life into 4 suitcases and 2 boxes. 58 years reduced to what would fit in the trunk of my Camry. As I folded my clothes and wrapped my few remaining photographs, I kept waiting for Amanda to come upstairs and apologize, to say she'd spoken in grief, and of course I could stay until I found somewhere else to go. She never came. Instead, at exactly 6 p.m. the next day, she appeared in my doorway with her arms crossed. "Time's up, Charlie." I zipped the last suitcase closed and looked around the room that had been my sanctuary for 2 years. The walls were bare now, stripped of the few personal touches I'd been allowed to add. It looked like a guest room again, which I supposed it always had been. "I'll need a few more minutes to get everything to the car," I said. "I'll help you." It wasn't an offer. It was a statement. We made 3 trips in silence. As I loaded the last box into my car, I turned to say goodbye, maybe to make one final appeal to whatever remained of her humanity. "I know you're angry with me for some reason," I said quietly. "I wish I knew what I'd done wrong so I could fix it." Amanda's expression didn't soften. "You didn't do anything wrong, Charlie. You just exist in my space, in my life, in my way. Ben felt sorry for you, but I don't." The honesty was brutal and somehow cleaner than the polite fiction we'd been maintaining. "I see." I got into my car and rolled down the window. "Will you at least tell me if there's going to be a formal reading of Ben's will? I assume he left something. Why would he leave you anything?" Amanda's voice was genuinely puzzled. "You're not his wife, and it's not like you ever contributed financially to our household." The irony was so sharp, it actually made me smile. The $50,000 I'd given them for the down payment might disagree with that assessment. But clearly Amanda had either conveniently forgotten or genuinely convinced herself it had been a gift. "Of course," I said. "Silly of me to assume." I drove away without looking back, heading toward the Hampton Inn on Route 9. It was the closest hotel I could afford while I figured out what came next. In the rearview mirror, I watched Amanda stand in the driveway until my car disappeared around the corner. At the hotel, I checked in for a week and carried my suitcases to a generic room that smelled like industrial cleaning products and broken dreams. I sat on the polyester bedspread and stared at my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. Who was this man looking back at me? A widower, now childless, homeless, and apparently worthless in the eyes of the only family he had left. But as I sat there in that sterile room, something unexpected began to stir in my chest. Not despair, though that was there too. Something sharper, something that felt almost like anticipation. Amanda thought she'd won. She thought she'd successfully discarded the inconvenient father-in-law and claimed her prize. What she didn't know was that Ben had been a much better son than she'd ever given him credit for. 2 weeks into my hotel stay, just as I was starting to seriously worry about my dwindling savings, the call came from Ben's lawyer, Mr. Newman. "This is Attorney Richardson from Richardson & Associates. I handled your son's legal affairs." "Yes, Mr. Richardson. I remember meeting you at Ben and Amanda's house closing. I'm calling to inform you that the probate process is complete, and there will be a formal reading of Ben's will next Tuesday at 2 p.m. in my office. Your presence is required." My presence was required. I sat up straighter, ignoring the way the cheap mattress springs protested. "I'm sorry, but I think there might be some confusion." "Amanda seemed to think," Mr. Newman, Richardson interrupted gently. "I can only tell you what Ben's will specifies, and it specifically names you as a beneficiary. I'll see you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. After he hung up, I stared at my phone for a long moment. Ben had left me something after all. Probably some small keepsake, maybe his father's watch or the photo albums from his childhood. Amanda wouldn't be happy about it, but she'd have to live with whatever Ben had decided. I spent the weekend apartment hunting online, looking at senior living communities and modest one-bedroom rentals within my budget. My savings account could cover another week at the hotel, plus first month's rent and a security deposit, but I'd need to be careful. Social Security and the pension from my insurance company would have to stretch further than I'd originally planned. At 1:45 p.m. the following Tuesday, I sat in the parking lot of Richardson & Associates, watching Amanda emerge from a silver BMW wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly budget. She'd brought someone with her, Kyle, her brother, in an expensive suit, checking his phone constantly. When I walked into the reception area, Amanda's face darkened. "What is he doing here?" she demanded of the receptionist. "Mr. Newman is here for the will reading." The young woman replied professionally. "Which Mr. Newman?" Amanda's voice rose slightly. "Both of you, apparently." Kyle leaned over to whisper something in Amanda's ear. She nodded curtly and took a seat across the waiting room from me, making it clear that whatever temporary civility might have existed between us was officially over. Richardson appeared promptly at 2 p.m. and ushered us into his office. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s with silver hair and gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of lawyer who probably still believed in doing right by his clients. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, settling behind his mahogany desk. "I know this is a difficult time, but Ben was very specific about his wishes. I'll read the will in its entirety, and then we can discuss any questions." Amanda sat forward eagerly, her hands clasped in her lap. Kyle had pulled out a legal pad and was preparing to take notes. I simply folded my hands and waited. The first part of the will was exactly what I'd expected. Amanda inherited the house, the cars, Ben's retirement accounts, and his life insurance policy. She nodded approvingly at each item, occasionally glancing at me with something that looked like satisfaction. Then Richardson's voice changed slightly, and I knew we were approaching something important. There is, however, one final provision that Ben added just 4 months ago. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Amanda stopped nodding and leaned forward, her eyes sharp with sudden attention. Kyle put down his pen and I found myself holding my breath. Richardson cleared his throat and continued reading. To my father, Charles Newman, who provided the down payment for our home and has never asked for repayment, I leave the contents of Safety Deposit Box 337 at First National Bank, along with all associated documentation and account information contained therein. What safety deposit box? Amanda's voice was sharp. Ben never mentioned a safety deposit box. Richardson looked up from the document. Apparently, it was something he maintained privately. He was quite specific that the contents should go to his father. I was as surprised as Amanda, but for different reasons. Ben had never mentioned a safety deposit box to me either. What could he possibly have put there that was meant for me? What's in it? Kyle asked, his lawyer instincts kicking in. I have no idea. Richardson replied honestly. Ben simply provided the bank information and instructions that Mr. Newman should have full access upon his death. Amanda's face was flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. If there's anything of value in that box, it should be part of the estate. We need to contest this. You're certainly free to try, Richardson said mildly, but the provision is very clear, and Ben was completely competent when he added it to his will. I witnessed the document myself. When exactly did he add this provision? I asked quietly. Richardson consulted his notes. 4 months ago, January 15th. He came in specifically to make this addition, January 15th. I remembered that date clearly because it was the day after our family dinner, where Amanda had been particularly cold, making pointed comments about my contribution to household expenses. Ben had seemed unusually quiet throughout the meal. This is a waste of time, Amanda snapped, standing abruptly. Kyle, let's go. We'll file a challenge tomorrow. Actually, Richardson said, pulling out another document before you leave. I need to inform you both that Ben left specific instructions for his father regarding the contents of the safety deposit box. He handed me a sealed envelope. These are the bank documents and his personal key. The bank will need to verify the death certificate and process the paperwork before you can access the box. Usually takes about 3 business days. Amanda's eyes fixed on the envelope in my hands like a hawk watching a mouse. I'm coming with you to the bank. I'm afraid that's not possible, Richardson interjected. The safety deposit box access is restricted to Mr. Charlie Newman only. Bank policy. This is insane, Amanda sputtered. How do we even know there's anything valuable in there? It could be empty or just sentimental junk. I stood up, clutching the envelope. I suppose we'll find out next week. As we filed out of the office, I could feel Amanda's eyes boring into my back. In the parking lot, she cornered me beside my car. Charlie, let's be reasonable about this, she said, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. Whatever's in that box, we should share it. Ben would have wanted his wife to benefit from anything he left behind. For the first time since Ben's death, I almost smiled. You made it very clear that you don't believe Ben would have left me anything. Now suddenly you're concerned about sharing? I'm just saying, you're saying whatever you think will get you access to that safety deposit box. I unlocked my car door, but Ben was very specific. The contents are mine. Her mask slipped completely then, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Don't forget, Charlie, you're homeless. You need my goodwill more than I need yours. I paused with my hand on the car door. Actually, Amanda, I don't think I need anything from you at all. 3 business days later, after providing the death certificate and completing the bank's paperwork, I finally stood before Safety Deposit Box 3537 at First National Bank. The bank manager, Mrs. Henderson, was expecting me. She'd obviously been briefed about the situation because she offered her condolences and escorted me personally to the vault area. Box 3537 is one of our larger units. She explained as we walked through the security doors. Your son rented it about 6 years ago and visited quite regularly. 6 years? Ben had been planning something for 6 years. Mrs. Henderson used her master key while I inserted Ben's key, and the box slid out smoothly. It was indeed large, about the size of a briefcase, and surprisingly heavy. Take all the time you need, Mrs. Henderson said, showing me to a private viewing room. I'll be at my desk when you're finished. Alone in the small windowless room, I lifted the lid of the safety deposit box. The first thing I saw was a letter addressed to me in Ben's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dad, it began, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Amanda has probably shown you exactly who she really is. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not surprised. I've known for years what kind of person I married, and I've been preparing for this possibility. My heart raced as I continued reading. You gave us $50,000 for our house down payment. I know you thought of it as a loan, even though you never asked for repayment. I've been investing that money for the past 6 years, adding to it whenever possible. The money in the accompanying accounts isn't just repayment, it's what careful investing has grown into. I set the letter down with shaking hands and looked at the documents underneath. Bank statements, investment portfolios, account numbers. My eyes scanned the balance sheets, trying to make sense of the numbers. 5,000 in various investment accounts, all in my name, all accessible with proper documentation. I picked up Ben's letter again, hardly believing what I was reading. I also discovered that Amanda has been telling people you contribute nothing to our household. What she doesn't mention is that our mortgage has been automatically paid from my salary account for the entire time you've lived with us. Any money you've given us went straight into investments for your future. The letter continued, I've been documenting everything, Dad. Every email, every text, every casual comment she's made about you. It's all in the folder labeled documentation. I thought you should know what kind of person has been living in our house. My vision blurred as I reached for the folder he'd mentioned. Inside were printed emails, text message, screenshots, even photographs of credit card statements, evidence of years of manipulation and deceit. The final paragraph of Ben's letter made my eyes fill with tears. You deserve so much better than the way she's treated you. Take this money and build yourself a life where no one can make you feel unwanted ever again. And Dad, don't tell Amanda about any of this until you're safely away from her. Trust me on this one. All my love, Ben. I sat in that little room for nearly an hour, reading through everything Ben had left for me. By the time I emerged, I had a clear picture of exactly how my daughter-in-law had been manipulating both of us for years. Mrs. Henderson helped me transfer all the documents to a large envelope and explained the process for accessing the investment accounts. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. Charlie, Amanda's voice was falsely sweet. I was wondering if you'd like to come by for lunch today. We could discuss what you found in the safety deposit box. I smiled at my reflection in the car window. That's very generous, Amanda. I'll be there at noon. It was time for Amanda to learn that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who surprise you most. I arrived at Amanda's house, her house now, at exactly noon, carrying a small gift bag and wearing my best poker face. She answered the door in a flowing white dress that probably cost more than my monthly hotel bill, all smiles and false warmth. Charlie, I'm so glad you came. I've made your favorite chicken salad. Funny how she remembered my favorite foods now that she wanted something from me. The dining room table was set with her wedding china and fresh flowers. Amanda had clearly put effort into this performance. She poured iced tea and chattered about the weather while I sat quietly, watching her work up to what she really wanted to discuss. So she finally said, settling into her chair with practiced grace, I've been thinking about yesterday about the safety deposit box, have you? I sipped my tea calmly. I know we've had our differences, but Ben would want us to support each other through this difficult time. Family should stick together. Family, rich coming from the woman who'd thrown me out the day after her husband's funeral. I couldn't agree more, I said evenly. Amanda's eyes lit up, clearly thinking she'd found an opening. I'm so relieved to hear you say that. I was worried you might be angry about having to find your own place so quickly, but you understand I needed space to grieve. Of course. I took a bite of chicken salad. Grief affects everyone differently. Exactly. She leaned forward eagerly. So about what Ben left you, I was thinking we could pool our resources, combine whatever was in that box with Ben's life insurance, maybe invest it together. I have some wonderful financial advisors. I bet she did. The same ones who'd been helping her make questionable spending decisions with Ben's money. That's very thoughtful, Amanda. But I'm curious, what makes you think there was anything valuable in the safety deposit box? She paused, clearly not expecting the question. Well, Ben was always so private about certain financial matters. He must have had a reason for keeping something separate. Private? That's an interesting choice of words. You know what I mean? She waved a hand dismissively. Men and their financial planning. They never tell us wives everything. I set down my fork and looked directly at her. Actually, Amanda, I think Ben told you exactly as much as he thought you needed to know. Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, maybe a hint of fear. What did you find in the box, Charlie? The moment of truth was approaching, but I wasn't quite ready to play that card yet. Instead, I reached for the gift bag I'd brought. I brought you something, I said, pulling out a small wrapped package, a little thank you gift. She unwrapped it eagerly, revealing a framed photograph of Ben from his college graduation. Her face softened slightly. Oh, Charlie, this is lovely. Thank you. I thought you should have it. After all, you were such a devoted wife. The emphasis I placed on devoted wasn't lost on her. She looked up sharply, searching my face for hidden meaning. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. I'm just appreciating how well you took care of my son. Amanda set the photograph down carefully, her demeanor shifting. The fake sweetness was evaporating, replaced by something warier. Charlie, you're being cryptic. Just tell me what was in the safety deposit box. I smiled and took another sip of tea. Documents, mostly. Very interesting reading material. What kind of documents? Oh, financial records, investment statements, some correspondence. I paused meaningfully. Quite a few printed emails and text messages. The color drained from Amanda's face. Text messages, Ben was quite thorough in his record keeping, especially toward the end. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos Ben had taken of various text conversations. Would you like to see one? This is from about 8 months ago. I turned the screen toward her, showing a screenshot of her texting Kyle. God, I can't wait until that old man finally moves out. Then we can turn his room into the home office I've been wanting. Amanda lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back smoothly. There are dozens more, I said. Conversationally, Ben was apparently very good at documentation. Stop. Amanda's voice was barely a whisper. And then there's the email where you're laughing with Kyle about how gullible I am. How easy it was to make me feel like a burden when you'd already planned to kick me out after Ben's death. I set the phone down and looked at her with what I hoped was mild curiosity. That was forward thinking of you, planning my eviction while Ben was still alive. Amanda's composure finally cracked completely. He had no right to save private messages. Actually, he had every right. It was his house, and you were discussing his father. I leaned back in my chair. The question is, what are we going to do about this situation? What do you want? The mask was completely off now, revealing the calculating woman underneath. Want? I don't want anything from you, Amanda. I never did. Then why are you doing this? What's the point? You threw me out of my home the day after my son's funeral. You told me I was worthless, that Ben felt sorry for me, that I'd contributed nothing to your household. I stood up slowly. But here's what you didn't understand about Ben. He saw everything, every cruel comment, every manipulation, every lie you told. Amanda was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. And you want to know the really beautiful part? I continued. He documented all of it, not to hurt you, but to protect me. Because he knew that once he was gone, you'd show your true colors. I pulled out the folder from Ben's safety deposit box and placed it on the table between us. Ben left me more than just text screenshots, Amanda. He left me 6 years worth of evidence showing exactly how you've been manipulating both of us. She stared at the folder like it might bite her. Bank statement showing that the house payments have been automatically deducted from Ben's salary for the entire time I've been living here. Email chains between you and Kyle discussing how to handle the Charlie situation. Credit card statements showing luxury purchases made on the same days you told Ben we couldn't afford basic household items. Amanda's breathing was becoming shallow. Ben saved all of that. Everything, including copies of the emails you sent to your friends, calling him a pushover and joking about how easy it was to manipulate him into thinking I was a financial burden. I opened the folder and showed her one of the investment statements. According to these documents, I apparently have quite a bit worth protecting. Money that Ben had been carefully growing for the past 6 years. That's impossible. You're living in a hotel. I'm living in a hotel because I choose to be there while I figure out my next move, not because I can't afford better. The silence stretched between us as Amanda processed this information. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. How much? She finally asked. I pulled out my phone and opened one of the banking apps the bank had helped me set up. The account balance filled the screen and I turned it toward her, $145,000. Amanda's face went white. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. But that's almost as much as the life insurance policy. Yes, it is. And Ben was very specific about who should have it. That money should be part of the estate. It should be split between us. Should it? Based on what legal principle? Based on the fact that I'm his wife and you're just his father. The casual cruelty in those words, just his father, hit me like a physical blow. But instead of pain, I felt something else. Clarity. You know what, Amanda? You're absolutely right. I'm just his father. The man who raised him, supported him through college, and lent him the down payment for the house where you threw me out like garbage. I picked up my jacket, and apparently that was enough for Ben to make sure I'd never have to depend on anyone's charity again. I left her there in her expensive dining room, surrounded by her wedding china and her carefully constructed life, and walked out into the sunshine of my new beginning. 2 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a comfortable 2-bedroom place in a nice senior community about 20 minutes from where Ben used to live. The investment accounts Ben had set up made the rent easily affordable, with plenty left over for the kind of retirement I'd only dreamed about. I'd joined the community's investment club, where my insurance background and Ben's financial planning had made me something of a local expert. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now the one giving advice on protecting assets from gold-digging family members. Amanda had tried calling a few times in those first weeks, but I'd let them all go to voicemail. Her messages went from angry demands for my rightful share to tearful apologies to desperate pleas for family unity. I deleted them all without listening to the end. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's justice served exactly when it's needed most. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it comes with financial security and the knowledge that the child you raised turned out to be exactly the man you hoped he'd become. Ben had taken care of me after all, just like he'd promised he always would. Even from beyond the grave, my son had kept his word. And that more than any amount of money was the greatest gift he could have given me. I was 58 years old, and for the first time in years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Sometimes the people who love you most are the ones planning your protection long before you even know you need it. And the greatest inheritance isn't money, it's knowing someone cared enough to see the real threats to your future. Never mistake someone's kindness for weakness, and never underestimate an old man who spent decades learning how the world really works, because experience and wisdom are the most dangerous weapons against those who think they're smarter than everyone else.